And if you're in any doubt as to what we mean by telemedia, it is anything to do with premium content, driving sales of value-added services, and generating wonderful commercial billing within applications. And obviously the payments and the marketing and the network infrastructure needed to deliver all these fantastic services to the market. Today, let me tell you what we're going to be talking about, Paul.
Go on then.
I will. We're going to be kicking off with a story about RCS and how that is continuing to show signs of becoming a key marketing channel. And this also ties in nicely with some of the CPaaS issues that Paul and I were very lucky enough to be part of when we were guests at the Genesis Live show in Malaga last week. So CPaaS is not surprisingly quite high on the agenda, and that all ties in with this whole omni-channel messaging thing, which is of course important because we need channels to market, to sell all these fantastic services to consumers out there who are hungry for digital entertainment, infotainment, edutainment, and all that good stuff. We're then going to be talking about DCB, obviously a central billing mechanism for the telemedia industry. Some good news coming out of from a report that Juniper put out this week talking about how DCB spend is growing. However, this is always set against the competition from instant payments and a variety of other alternative payments that are out there. And this is clearly something that any payment service provider in the telemedia space needs to be very well aware of. And instant payments seem to be on the up as well, probably unsurprisingly. And we're going to kick off with, and we're going to conclude with some very interesting and exciting, potentially exciting news, or potentially just dreadful news. I don't really know, and I've got to wait and see what Paul thinks about it. But things are changing in the UK with regards to our dear regulator, the PSA, and they've got a new home, and we're going to be talking about the impact of that and the rationales behind it. So without further ado, Paul, first story, RCS evolving into next generation marketing channel for MNOs and advertisers, a study reveals. So we've talked about RCS before. It's constantly on the agenda. We talked about how it's kind of messaging, but like email, it's going to be groovy. And obviously it's going to enhance CRM and conversational commerce, but it's also going to be massive as a marketing channel. What did this story tell you?
Well, I picked it out because it came out while we were sitting in the conference room at the Rocco Genesis Live event in Malaga.
Freezing, actually. It was freezing, wasn't it?
It was really cold, and not a sniff of the sunshine that was outside, nor indeed use of the slide in the hotel foyer. Exactly. But Upstream, our friends at Upstream, punted out this report looking at the use of RCS. There's some interesting statistics in there. There's nothing sort of monumentally groundbreaking per se about what they found. They found all the usual things like the sort of 37% higher conversion rate for RCS than SMS in campaigns and that sort of thing. We all get it that RCS is potentially quite good. What is interesting is it sort of does call out the operators that they really need to get behind this and start pushing it, which I think we've discussed in previous podcasts, because this is going to go nowhere unless the sort of network operators get behind it and really start to push it. But what I think is really interesting is it's sort of there's more and more stuff now coming out about RCS. It's starting to gain some momentum, I think, within the industry, if maybe not so much with the network operators, but they're starting to see that there are some real potential here. And I think that the sort of aggregator community is starting to sort of see that this could be a real money spinner. It's something they want to get their hands on and use, and they're constantly urging operators that there's a lot of money to be made in there. And of course, the operators have to roll out RCS because otherwise they're going to have all their business taken away by WhatsApp and other OTT messaging services. So it's an interesting timing, I think, by Upstream to stick out this report, which really does sort of, like I say, it doesn't tread new ground per se, but it does really very clearly and coherently put the sort of business case for RCS together. And once again, sort of punts it out there that it really does allow network operators to tie up with brands who want to advertise through it. And there's a lot of money to be made there, particularly. I mean, all right, SMS isn't sort of dwindling, but it's the sort of revenues from it are for operators. Plus, all this stuff we learned about sort of CPaaS and the money that can be made from CPaaS services for network operators. RCS is part of that. So interesting timing, an interesting report, and yet more sort of fuel to the fire of why we should sort of start to be pushing RCS.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that Upstream are one of our Telemedia 8.1 exhibitors, so you can go and visit their company page and see their profiles and meet their team and view their excellent video presentations on the Telemedia 8.1 website. And you will also find links to this new white paper in the newsroom on the site. I suppose from an RCS point of view, one of the other interesting sort of angles that I picked up on recently on my travels, I know, clearly we need to be engaging the operators, and we need the operators to take a much more active role in helping to roll this out. But I think also, if there's any doubt that this has got some real potential, was also looking at it from the affiliate marketing side. And as you know, I went to ClickBid in Mexico a couple of weeks ago, hence, and I still have my wonderful tan.
Your base tan.
Or indeed burn. And it's very interesting if you look at the kind of digital marketing community, there's still a really big chunk of those guys that are dedicated to email marketing. And, they sort of have the sort of kind of quite at the moment set in their ways. We are an email marketing company, and then you've obviously got your mobile marketing companies as well. Clearly, when these companies start to have their business eroded, the stats on email the sort of engagement rates just go down and down and down and down. The opportunity to be able to send rich content messages that look a bit like emails directly to mobile phones has got to be a natural progression. And talking to a lot of the mobile marketing guys in Mexico, they certainly, are predicting that there'll be a big chunk of the sort of digital marketing community that will inevitably migrate across, and they will be looking for, other messaging services that, that they kind of understand. And if they understand what works on email and the sort of magic that can be created within a traditional email message, and then they take that expertise and they apply that to an RCS messaging strategy, the results, should be very good and kind of almost back to, the good old days. So I think there's still a bit of reluctance from that side to move across to mobile, but I feel as though it is only going to be inevitable, really. So that will also, I think, fuel demand for RCS messaging services and should be very successful. You touched on CPaaS there, and again, I think a lot of people like me are probably still sort of wrestling with how CPaaS is different to what they might already be doing. We've talked about that before. Can you just sort of outline how RCS fits into that whole sort of CPaaS strategy or that CPaaS world, and why we should be talking about it? Well,
CPaaS, what's different about CPaaS is that sort of unlike how, a lot of people say, oh, it's just what we've always done. It sort of is, but it's where it takes place. It takes place sort of in public cloud, essentially. So it's bought in as a service. It's stuff that sits in the cloud as a service rather than on proprietary servers or owned by the company using it. So that's why CPaaS is significant. It's about where it lives. And that's important because it means it's often much cheaper to run it, develop it, package it up, sell it as a service to companies. Now, customer-facing businesses want as many messaging channels as possible to contact their customers on, and for their customers to contact them. We've seen this over the lockdown because it used to be you try and phone up British Gas or whoever, and you were in a queue, and then you spoke to someone in a call center. That's all gone out the window. It's people want to do it via SMS. They want to do it via WhatsApp, they want to do it via sort of Facebook, they want to do it, in the ways they want to do it, and they want to pick up their phone and do a sort of instant chat or send a message or get a text confirmation, or it's all those things. And RCS is significant to CPaaS because it is just another messaging channel. So on the one hand, we have the operators being encouraged to do more to publicize and push out RCS because, as you say, affiliate marketers and other marketing sort of operations want to use it as a way of reaching customers. It's also a customer sort of service channel. If it takes off, it will become a key one. It will probably, to some degree, replace SMS, certainly as a sort of inbound from consumers. I think SMS is always going to be there with alerts and stuff like that, and one-time passcodes and those sorts of things. So it's significant because it is going to probably be part of the mix if they get their act together. Now, operators can make money out of RCS, which they need to do. They can also make money out of CPaaS and running CPaaS, and they can bring the two things together to run CPaaS that also includes RCS. Because part of the problem with operators having a CPaaS sort of solution that they can sell to businesses is that they have to add in things that cannibalize their own messaging channels, such as WhatsApp and other instant messaging things. This way, they get an instant messaging like technology in RCS that's rich and lovely, but that they can also actually make money out of. So, it's all coming together, or it might all come together at some point soon.
Yeah. And it depends on who brings it all together. I mean, we've seen in the last couple of years, particularly at World Telemedia, lots more providers talking about cloud-based services, which, 5 or 6 years ago perhaps wouldn't have been something.
Everything's in the cloud now. It's because it's much cheaper to someone else builds the massive server farms and pays the electricity bill for them. But it means that you can develop things much more quickly and much more agilely because you're not having to tie up time and money in building the actual sort of physical stuff that it works on. So It's all going to be in the cloud, baby.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for that. Let's talk about our favourite billing mechanism, direct carrier billing, DCB. The next story reads, DCB spend for digital goods to exceed 74 billion in 2026, dominated by digital games. Again, we've referenced Juniper Research in the past. They're working very hard to provide some excellent data. And there's links in that story to this particular report, which is entitled Carrier Billing, Opportunities and Market Forecasts 2022 to 2026. I think we would probably reference this report every year, don't we? This growth is more than 37%, and it reflects the increasing relevance of carrier billing as an option for digital commerce spend. I suspect that doesn't necessarily apply to the UK market, but once again, in other markets around the world, we're seeing some really great DCB stories. So what was your take on this? Because I know that following this, we've also got the other side of the coin.
Well, it was all about payments, really. That sort of alternative ways of paying for things are on the up. Digital ways of paying for things. I want to kick off with the look at carrier billing. Yes, Juniper update this report every year and move it along, but each year it does go up and up and up, and it's had a sort of significant boost in the last year or two. It's already worth $54 billion around the world, carrier billing in this year. So it's going to add another 20 billion by 2026, they predict. But it's sort of symptomatic of the fact that people want new ways of paying. They want digital, quick, fast, easy ways of paying. What stood out, well, two things stood out for me really with this was the first one was that Juniper predicting the use of it for buying sort of remote physical goods payments, which we've talked about carrier billing for 20 years or so that we've been doing this, and it's always and still is sort of wedded to not being able to be used for physical goods. But the sort of Juniper is predicting that is likely to change. It's got a sort of low user base at the moment, but it's a significant opportunity for operators, which adds to the opportunity that this boom in carrier billing for digital goods is already potentially giving them, where they could be making $11 billion a year out of it worldwide, which is not insignificant. If you spread that around all the mobile network operators, it's still quite a lot of money. And I think, again, echoing a bit what we were saying about RCS, is that sort of this needs to be taken more seriously again. These things look like sort of small incremental revenue streams to network operators, but they all add up, don't they? And they're not going to be dominant in voice and SMS forever. That's all slowly being eroded. So they need to find and cultivate these new ways of making money, and carrier billing is one of them. And I think they need to work fast to get this carrier billing growth going, because as we will see in the next story, which very much builds on this, there are many other ways of paying for digital goods via mobile that are probably even easier to use than carrier billing.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, we just before we went live, I know that one of our favorite trade associations is setting up a working group to look at alternative payments, because if you work in a country where regulation and or the mobile network operators are not really that supportive for something like carrier billing, despite the fact it's got loads and loads of fantastic features and reasons why it should be very popular with consumers, if it's not really being supported by the regulatory environment, or more importantly, perhaps the mobile operators, consumers will find other alternatives. And I think it's important to sort of to refocus when we talk about world telemedia. I mean, we really do talk about any payment mechanism that a consumer might use to buy services on their phone, or to subscribe to premium content services, or to upgrade their experience within an application. And I think as you rightly point out, we are going to start seeing service providers and merchants moving to as many payment it makes sense for them to offer as many payment mechanisms as they possibly can, but it might well be that alternatives start to become just a bit more practical to offer, which brings us to I suppose the elephant, not really an elephant in the room. There are some really big players out there, and the story reads: instant payments market to reach an eye-watering 126.4 billion by 2032, driven by e-commerce. The report says. It doesn't actually say what that report was, but as I say, I think it's important to remind PSPs in this space and the MNOs that should be supporting those PSPs in the carrier billing space, that they are up against the likes of VocaLink, Swift, PayPal, Apple, of course, Paytm, to name but a few. So these boys are big hitters, and instant payments are on the rise, and that is definitely a threat to carrier billing, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, sort of consumers and the way they pay, like the way they do anything, it's like water. It'll just settle at the sort of its most base level. They'll find the ways of doing things that are really easy, and instant bank-to-bank payments are now possible, because you can do faster payments between banks, which has initially been sort of sold as a way of people paying each other, so peer-to-peer payments being you buy a round of drinks, I can then give you my half instantly, but really that's not where its potential lies. Its potential lies in paying like as a micro payment thing for paying merchants, well, not even just micro payments. It could it can be much larger ones. It's typically sort of smaller value things, but you could see this being used as a way of paying instantly in shops, online, peer-to-peer, for services in a method of paying that will pop up in an RCS message asking you to buy something, and it's clearly it's backed by a lot of really big companies, like the really, really big ones. Carrier billing could be the network operators, who, let's not forget, are also very massive, powerful companies. They have that version, or that way of doing very quick and easy ways of paying also. Coming back to what we were saying about carrier billing, unless they sort of act to sort of push it more, it's just going to lose out to things like this. And you're quite right. I mean, I've always said about the sort of telemedia things, it's not just about carrier billing and charging to sort of phone bills. It's about it's increasingly about selling content and services and that sort of thing, and that any payment mechanism will do. And you see it now anywhere you go to try and buy anything, particularly online or in games or anything else, you get a vast array of different ways of paying. Apple, PayPal, your bank account, all sorts of things, and it's all there, and they're all competing.
I think it's important. I think it's important to also. So I mean, yes, the likes of Barclays and Apple and instant payments are presenting mobile operators specifically with the threat, but it doesn't stop mobile payment service providers taking advantage of the whole idea of open banking to
absolutely not. No, and they can probably create some really interesting, services based around those sort of instant payments.
I mean, it'd be really interesting to catch up with Democo in the next couple of weeks, because I know they put some stories out at the end of last year, which specifically talked about launching services in Germany.
Yeah, they've been doing it
using open banking. So we must we'll try and get an update on that. I mean, certainly, fingers crossed, if you're going to World Telemedia in Marbella on the 19th to the 21st of October, and I hope you are, because there's no reason to avoid it. It's going to be a fantastic event. I'm certainly, Democo and other mobile service payment providers are available, and there surely will all be in Marbella. So if you really want to find out what's going on in that space and you want innovative payments, then Marbella World Telemedia is the place to be. And if you go to www, you don't need to say that anymore, do you? It's just
I don't think so. I think just yes. I don't even need that bit.
Sorry, if you go to wt.event.com, you will now find all the information you need about the show, the exhibition, the networking, how you can get involved, and of course how you can register. And I would urge you to do that this very day. Let's go on to our last story, Paul. And this is a UK story. And I mean, I did have a little smile when I first read it, and then I kind of got a bit deeper and thought, well, maybe it's not that funny. The UK PRS regulator, the PSA, is going to be disbanded and merged into or absorbed by the mighty Ofcom. The tagline being, "It's a victim of its own success," which did raise a smile. Basically, the story as a result, I guess, of PSA's excellent work, and I have to say that with a certain tongue in my cheek, because it depends very much on what your perspective is on that. They have managed to drive complaints down in the UK. The complaints are down by over 90%. So they've virtually wiped out complaints. Many, I believe, in the UK industry would say, and that's because they've virtually wiped out the PRS industry, in many cases. So it's, I mean, you've really got to view that, that you can view that from two sides of the fence, I think. What do you take from this, Paul? I mean, it feels like there's probably not going to be too many changes. I guess the most important thing is, how will Ofcom manage it, and will it be managed any differently to being the sort of independent body that it currently is?
Well, I think there's two ways of looking at this. One, like you say, have they successfully throttled the premium rate industry to such an extent that there isn't really any of those services left? That's why the complaints have gone down. Or alternatively, you can look at it as I choose to, that this sort of vindicates what we've been saying for the last sort of 3 years, that this industry has just become now a very mainstream operation, and the kind of services that are put out there are used by a much wider, larger number of people, and they're run by bigger companies that are better managed, and it isn't the Wild West that it used to be. So possibly the complaints have gone down because the stuff's just better run. I like to think that it's a bit of both, that some harsh regulation made people realise that, well, if we do this properly, we can still make a lot of money, and have done that and grown it into a much more mainstream business. I think a lot of it as well is that, it's not all about premium rate telephone calls to services. Everything is more online based. It's all very different. We do live in a very different world to the one we'd lived in even 10 years ago around these kind of services. So perhaps, the PSA has run its course in many ways. It should possibly be part of Ofcom, but the story which came out today, I mean, it's this is all there is on it so far.
Yeah, I think
does offer some, ask some, there's bigger questions to be asked. It's like, well, how is Ofcom going to regulate this, and what comes after the 15th code? They say they're going to, carry on sort of working with the last code that the PSA sort of had put in place, but what comes next, and where does this all go? So I think it beggars more questions than it answers.
Yeah, I think it's worth also quoting the chairman of the PSA, and also one of my favourite musical legends, Mr. Dave Edmonds, who says the work of the PSA in recent years has reduced risks to consumers to historically low levels. Both phone companies and service providers are increasingly conscious of their own responsibility to ensure dubious services are not operated. I suppose you can't really argue that. I think the sense that, as you said, that the industry has moved from the Wild West to being, pretty responsible, mature, dynamic business where there is now merit in selling high quality services to consumers, and perhaps it's easier to do that than to run the gauntlet with regulatory or taking liberties with sort of regulations in various countries. There are still obviously those bad actors out there that do try and do that, and that does spoil things for everybody else. I feel as though more, the biggest concern is a sort of less scams and more about fraud nowadays, really.
Totally, yeah.
Which is why, the telemedia industry has some very excellent and very high profile supporters in the likes of Impello, MCP, Avena, etc. Upstream, and many other companies that are actually, sort of writing anti-fraud into their sort of business plan with a view to actually helping them grow their business rather than it being considered to be a sort of negative or an elephant in the room. So yeah, it's an interesting development, and I think that's it sounds as though it's going to be a done deal. And as you said, or sort of suggested, it might well be that it sort of marks the point where we've sort of almost, it could be a beginning, if you like. You've got the industry to the point where you've got zero complaints. Maybe that's an opportunity to then start to build from here, which we very much hope it
well, I think that, well, yes, also you think, well, it's now part of Ofcom, it's part of mainstream communications and overseen by the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport. It's not something that requires its own specialized regulator, because it's a really specialized industry. It's just part now of the digital world. And yeah, so yes, in some ways it's sort of PSA, hey, remember them. This is what I first thought when I saw it. But because I haven't really heard anything about the PSA for ages, but clearly they haven't been very busy. So it's interesting to see that this is, it's not over yet. It's not till the sort of latter half of next year, 2023. But it's a very interesting development. I think it possibly is likely to be echoed elsewhere as well. I think because, like you say, the problem now is about fraud and cybersecurity. This sort of thing, I guess, is not such a big problem anymore.
So, well, that brings us very neatly to the end of a very nicely short, sweet and succinct session. Thank you very much, mate, for spending a bit of time with us and giving us your views on those stories. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time for more of the same. I just ought to quickly put out a shout out for our great friends MEF, the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. They're going to be running a 2-day event in Amsterdam on the 14th and 15th of June at the Hotel Krasnopolski, one of our old stomping grounds. I'm going to be out there. You're not going to make it, though.
I can't make it, I'm afraid. I've got some other things on. I only found out about it yesterday. And my diary's already fairly booked up between now and September.
Well, that's set to be an excellent event.
It looks like a really good one.
Yeah, heavily focused on messaging. Our great friend, Mr. Nick Lane, will be speaking, I know, bringing some fantastic data. So hopefully if anyone's going to be in Amsterdam, come and say hello to me. If you don't know about it, then go to the MEF website and sign up immediately. I believe it's free. And there's not, you can't get better than that, mate.
No, you can't. No, you can't. No.
So
I didn't realise it was free. That's
believe so. I hope so. Otherwise, maybe
that's the people who are going to now assume it is free. Brilliant.
Yeah. Okay, I better check my facts before I do that. Right. Okay, mate. So listen, thanks very much.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And I'll see you before that happens. You can then report back from what MEF's up to.
I will do if I can remember.
Subsequent podcast.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.